Hello, good afternoon, all of you. This is Dr.Saiful from the Department of English, Navanananda Mahavihar, Nalanda. Today I have come with another lecture of mine, and this lecture of mine is meant and designed for M.A. English 4th semester students, paper 16. The topic is Psychoanalytic Literary Criticism or Psychoanalysis. Dear students, we know that critical tool of inquiry is meant for understanding and analyzing a piece of work. Different critical theories have been applied to understand the modes of literature and to know what actually those pieces of literature contain. Here in psychoanalytic literary criticism, we try to use psychoanalysis to understand the inner recesses of the minds of the characters and what goes on into the fabric of literature. So, the application of psychoanalysis to the work of art is not only a recent development, but it was already prevalent in earlier times also. But it became very much famous during the recent time when psychoanalysts like Freud and Lacan came forward to understand how works of art behave in the realm of literature. The word psycho means pertaining to mind, and analysis means interpretation or analysis. Now the question remains to be said, how does this critical theory question the validity of the work of art? What does it actually use as its parameter? The simple thing is that literature is a very intricate or web-like matrix woven in language. And literature does not only reflect the society, it also reflects the hidden motives, the suppressed desires, or the unfulfilled love and joys of the authors or the writers or the characters that we find. Now, what is the proposition of Sigmund Freud? We have to know it and we have to understand it. Sigmund Freud is a very, very important psychoanalyst, psychologist, neurologist of the 20th century. He has written work Interpretation of Dreams, where he has very much focused on what is the nature and character of dream. To all of us, dream is something that comes when we are asleep. But this is not so easy to discuss. Dream has lots of things to say. Dreams are capable of telling all those unfulfilled joys, all those suppressed agonies, all those hidden thoughts and motives that we have during the day. So what have all these things to do with the work of art? Since work of art is also a reflection of the society, is also a reflection of the motives and thoughts of human beings, dreams have also to be taken into account. Sigmund Freud was concerned primarily with the treatment of the patients of neurosis. What is neurosis? It is a kind of mental disease. It is a kind of mental illness. It is a kind of schizophrenic situation where people or the victims are unable to associate their thoughts and ideas to the mainstream, and so they behave like madmen. They behave in a very abnormal manner. So Sigmund Freud feels that unless such kind of mental disease is cured, we cannot understand what is the reason behind this. So he was developing a kind of talk theory. talking to the patients, trying to know what are the hidden feelings in the mind. But the question remains to be said that if somebody asks you what you actually feel, what are your hidden thoughts, what are your hidden motives, you do not normally share, because you can share only what is socially acceptable. You can share only what is common, only what is to be shared. You cannot share the very basic or the very personal kinds of feelings, or those feelings which have something to do with the taboo issue. Taboo issue. The taboo issue is something which is socially unacceptable or which you feel shy of sharing with others. Suppose your most personal things, your love, your development, your evolution, your physical desires that you feel you cannot share. But Sigmund Freud feels that those hidden areas of human mind have to be understood in order to understand what is actually happening in the mind and heart of the people. So, he wants to say that unconscious is very much to be studied. That mind has layers and layers: conscious, subconscious, unconscious. Conscious mind is something that we are talking and we feel that yes, I am presented. This is a conscious mind. But subconscious mind is somewhere already working inside me, and unconscious is already hidden for far long back, and that also has to have something to do with the conscious, because when you are talking to someone in the present time in your conscious mind, at that time also the unconscious mind is trying to impinge on you. So that unconscious has to be studied in a very, very thorough manner. Freud wanted to know that unconscious which is hidden, which has lots to do with the original world, with the original thoughts. Human mind is a very, very mysterious thing. The more we try to understand human mind, the more complex it grows. How? Because human mind is like an iceberg. Iceberg, it is a very, very big piece of ice that is in ocean. And that iceberg is very big, very bulky, and a major portion of the iceberg is submerged in water, and only the tip of the iceberg is visible. Similarly, human mind that we see is just a kind of tip of the iceberg, and the major portion is hidden. Until and unless that major portion is understood, the whole cannot be ascertained. So Sigmund Freud was quite concerned about that. And the application of such analysis, such mode of inquiry, such psychological inquiry came to be popular in the field of literature. Whether it is literature, it is anthropology, it is linguistics, it is culture, it is sociology, it is geography, everywhere psychoanalysis mode of interpretation, psychoanalysis mode of analysis has entered. Because how? Things are changing. Everything is in a flux. We cannot judge a piece of work of art on the basis of one perspective, on the basis of one critical tool. There are so many critical theories that we apply, and this psychoanalytic critical theory is one of them. Sigmund Freud once said that it is very important that we should know the three zones of mind, or the three psychic zones that we know in the words of id, ego and superego. Now, if you do not understand id, ego and superego, you will not be able to understood what actually Sigmund Freud wants to say by these three things. It is actually a very, very uncontrollable part of the mind. That is a very wayward part of the mind that wants only satiation, that wants only satisfaction, that wants a flood of desire to be fulfilled. It does not know any kind of moral restraint, it does not know any kind of good or evil. Once it is arisen, it has to be fulfilled. Do you know, if the character is there in a work of art, he feels very much sexually excited, he feels very much physically driven, so he wants his physical desire to be immediately fulfilled. But then no, the other part of the mind, which is known as ego, that is a moral restraint, that is a regulatory power, that is a power of common sense, and that says that no, it is not very good. If you do this, if you indulge in such kind of activity, people will laugh at you, you will lose your reputation, you will lose your status. So ego is a bit superior to it, and as far as superego is concerned, it is a kind of idealism. It tries to reach at the point of perfection, at the point of pinnacle of perfection, because it is that thing which brings about a kind of peace, a kind of satisfaction, a kind of reconciliation of all the disturbing emotions. It is very creative, and it is very restrictive, and it is very, very morally driven, and it wants to make a balance between id and ego. That is why it is super ego. So the characters that we find in works of literature, whether it is a novel or drama or play or short stories, those all characters have to be judged through applying these critical materials, this psychoanalytical mode of inquiry like id, ego and superego, and we have to see that whether the character is behaving like this or not. If a character is behaving in this way, then we can say that it is only due to psychoanalytical id, it is only due to psychoanalytical ego, it is only due to psychoanalytical superego. So Freud created a kind of a space for us to inquire characters in such modes also. So now it becomes very much clear that literature, which is always regarded as a piece of linguistic representation, is not only a piece of linguistic representation, rather it has something to do with the depth of the mind of the author and writer and characters. Dear students, you should not be puzzled when you are doing criticism paper, because it is a kind of tonic that gives you to rejuvenate your mind. You do not know, if you read the text, only barely text, that what are going to be things that have been discussed. But if you develop your critical insight through understanding a few critical terms, and you begin to apply those critical terms to the study and analysis of those literatures, things will start becoming clear, or crystal clear. That is what I want to say. So Sigmund Freud initially was a doctor, was a physician, was a neurologist, and he has done lots of research in the fields of psychoanalysis, but only those part of his lecture, only those part of his inquiry is essential for us, which pertains to art and literature. And any art is at the same time a reflection of the society, of the poet's thoughts, poet's emotions, poet's unconscious feelings, and whatnot. After Freud started inquiring such kinds of literary thoughts, there came on the scene his disciple and colleague Lacan. Laka is also very, very important as far as linguistic is concerned, as far as socio-anthropological concern is concerned. And Laka tried to know literature as a piece of linguistic work, as a piece of language. And he says that the unconscious, which Freud has talked about, is a structured just like a language. Now, how can unconscious be a structured language? The thing to remember is that, or the thing to remind yourself is that language is a matrix of words, language is a matrix of thoughts, and unconscious has also to be taken in that way that it is also a kind of language. It has its own grammar, it has its own syntax, it has its own rules and regulations, and you have to understand that unconscious in order to understand what is known as literature. So he dealt with the aspects of language, and he has also very much analyzed the opinion of language by the great Swiss philosopher Ferdinand de Saussure. Ferdinand de Saussure is also a great philosopher whose contribution is immense in the field of linguistics. He is especially known for structuralism. So structuralism is also a part of psychoanalytic literary criticism. You have to bear it in your mind, because there is no watertight compartment between literature, between psychoanalysis and a structuralism. What is a structuralism of Ferdinand de Saussure? A structuralism is that which consists in the operation of language as a structure. Sigmund Freud has discussed this in his very important book, which is named perhaps General Course in Linguistics. And there he has discussed about the ideas of signifier and the signified. Two terms he has used which are very much important, and which every student of critical theories must know, that what is signifier and what is signified. According to signifier, he means sound realm, and signified is the thought realm. It is very much similar like Plato's idea and Plato's thought. What Plato says idea, Ferdinand de Saussure calls signified, and what Plato calls thought, Ferdinand de Saussure calls signified. Suppose I use the word pen. So the word pen is a kind of signifier. Pen is a signifier, and the thought which the word pen evokes is signified. And you have to understand all those things in order to understand how language works. So signifier and signified are very much important, because Ferdinand de Saussure means to say that in literature you find words on the paper. So words on the paper may be signifier, but they are signifier of what? They are signifier of signified. So how can you understand the signified if you do not understand the signifier? For example, if Wordsworth says 20,000 saw at a glance, so this is a signifier. This only wants to emphasize that a poet is there and he has seen so many stars in the sky. After he has seen so many stars in the sky, he just leaps with joy and he blurts out 20,000 saw at a glance. But what is the emotion that has been expressed by the poet in this line? That is very important to understand. Why? Because language is on the paper. Once you read the language, it is anybody can read language. So the study of literature is different from the study of science. In the study of science, there is nothing beyond that. If you study 2 plus 2 is equal to 4, there is nothing beyond that. But in the piece of literature, if you read 2 plus 2 is equal to 4, there is more thing implied beyond that. Because works of art do not only express the visible truth, they also deal with the invisible truth. They also compel you to imagine, to conjecture, and to apply your own mind, and to keep yourself in the place of the writer's mind to understand what he or she is trying to do. And the similar terrain has been chalked out by the psychoanalytic literary criticism. That is why I want to stress. And it is very important to know that so many works of literature have been influenced by psychoanalytical literary criticism. We do not normally apply such kind of theories to the study of literature, but once we understand that such critical theory, such critical mode of inquiry is also available to us, we begin to apply such critical theory and make the study of literature enjoyable and pleasant. One thing more I have to say regarding this, that Sigmund Freud made the canvas of literature wider because of his critical inquiry in this field, and thereafter so many writers started walking on the footsteps of Sigmund Freud, and we as students of literature, we as students of language also started discussing so many works that deal with psychoanalytical criticism. So one thing we have to keep in our mind, that the major thing is that Sigmund Freud has talked about unconscious, he has talked about dream, he has talked about infantile sexuality, he has talked about childhood sexuality, he has talked about other hidden things of life that have to be taken into consideration. One thing just occurs to me here at this moment of time is Freud's Oedipus complex, very much pertinent in the field of tragedy. What is Oedipal complex? Oedipal complex, which is opposed to Electra complex, is a kind of a complex thing, which is a kind of taboo issue also, if you say. But in the field of literature or language, nothing is to be hidden, there is nothing to be ashamed of, and so if this kind of inquiry is available, we should not feel ashamed to share with students, because it is things to study and analyze. So Oedipus complex is when a child is sexually attracted towards its mother and he despises his father, so the father becomes a kind of enemy of the child for the sake of mother's body. So what happens, that it is a kind of a complex that the child is attracted towards his mother, and he becomes the enemy of the father. So you really, oh sir, what are you saying? How can a son become an enemy of his father? No, it can be possible, it has been possible because of the sex